There is a cemetery in Illinois where, if you walk through it with the right instrument, a few of the graves will make it click. Not dangerously, just enough to register. Enough to be measurable 100 years later. The women buried there were factory workers. Most of them were young. Some were teenagers when they started. They had what was considered, at the time, one of the best jobs a working class woman could get. It was clean, skilled, indoor work. And it paid extremely well. And the thing that is still in their bones is the thing they were painting with. To understand how this happened, you have to understand how completely the world had fallen in love with radium. It had been isolated in 1898, and it did something no substance anyone had seen before. It glowed on its own, continuously, without heat, without burning, without anything being done to it, to a public that had just been introduced to electric light. This looked like magic, and it was treated like magic. Radium went into everything. Face cream, toothpaste, hair tonic, chocolate, suppositories, water dispensers you kept on the sideboard so your family could drink freshly irradiated water at dinner. It was advertised as healthful, invigorating, a tonic. The word people used was energy, and they meant it literally, because the stuff was demonstrably producing energy from nothing, which is exactly what everyone wanted to put in their body. Now, some scientists already knew better. The danger of radiation burns were documented well before 1920. Handlers of radium in laboratories were already taking precautions. But there was a gap, an enormous one, between what specialists knew and what the public was being sold. And the companies selling it were in no hurry to close that gap. And then someone realized that a substance which glows in the dark has an extremely obvious commercial use: watches. If you mix radium into a zinc-based paint, you get a compound that glows faintly and permanently. Paint it onto watch hands and onto the numerals on a dial, and you can read the time in darkness. The First World War made this enormously valuable. Soldiers needed to read instruments at night without a light that would give away a position. Aircraft needed luminous dials. Ships needed them. And after the war, the civilian market wanted them too, because a glowing wristwatch was a genuinely desirable object. So factories opened to make them, and they needed workers. The work was called dial painting, and it was fine, delicate work. The numerals on a wristwatch are about 1 millimeter across, and each one had to be painted cleanly and evenly by hand. The industry hired young women almost exclusively, partly because the work was considered to require small hands and patience, and partly because women could be paid less. But by the standards of the time, the pay was excellent. Dial painters were paid per dial, and a fast painter could earn more than most men in her town. It was the kind of job that girls competed for and recommended to their sisters and to their friends, which is why, in several of these factories, you find groups of sisters, 2, 3, 4 from one family. That detail matters later. Now here is the technique, and this is where the story turns. To paint something 1 millimeter wide, you need a brush with an extremely fine point, and camel hair brushes lose their point after a few strokes. So the women were taught a method. Put the brush between your lips, draw it out to reshape the tip, dip it in the paint, paint the numeral, repeat, lip, dip, paint. They were taught this as part of their training. It was the standard method demonstrated to them by the company. Some of them asked early on whether the paint was harmful. They were told it was not. One account describes a supervisor saying it would give them rosy cheeks. So they trusted the answer because there was no reason not to, and they did it hundreds of times a day for years. And because the paint was harmless, they played with it. They painted their fingernails so they would glow at a dance. They painted buttons and belt buckles. Some painted their teeth before going out in the evening as a party trick. One woman is said to have painted a glowing outline on her dress. They would come out of the factory at the end of a shift with the dust in their hair and on their clothes, and glow faintly on the walk home. In some of the towns, they were known as the Ghost Girls. And here is the detail that turns this from a tragedy into something else. In the same buildings, the chemists handling radium in bulk used lead aprons. They handled it with ivory-tipped tongs. They worked behind screens. The men who ran these companies knew radium had to be handled carefully. They were handling it carefully. And in the room next door, young women were putting it in their mouths several hundred times a shift because they had been told to. That is the whole story in one image. The precaution existed. It simply wasn't extended to the people doing the actual work. Now, why does this do what it does to a body? Radium sits in the same column of the periodic table as calcium. Chemically, it behaves similarly. So when it enters the body does something that is both logical and catastrophic. It mistakes it for calcium and files it away in the bones, not passing through, deposited, built in. And once it is in the bone, it stays, emitting continuously from the inside into the surrounding tissue for the rest of that person's life and long afterwards, because the radium itself takes over 1,000 years to reduce by half. These women were not exposed to something and then went home. They carried the source with them. The first symptoms appeared around 5 years in, which is one of the cruelest details in the whole account, and I'll explain why shortly. It started with teeth, dental problems that didn't heal properly, then jaw problems, then bones elsewhere that broke without cause, and a growing number of women across several towns becoming seriously and inexplicably ill in their 20s. I'm not going to describe the specifics because the specifics are horrific and they aren't the point. What matters is what happened next, because a dentist in New Jersey looked at a young woman's condition and could not account for it. He had never seen anything like it, and he started asking questions. And the questions led back to one factory. So what did the companies do? They denied it. They said there was no connection. They commissioned their own studies and did not publish the ones that pointed the wrong way. They sent company doctors to examine the women, who told them they were fine. And the results of those examinations were not passed on. And then they did something much worse than denial. They put out the suggestion that the women were ill because of syphilis. Understand what that accomplishes. In the 1920s, that accusation did not just distract from the medical question. It destroyed a young woman's standing in a small town. It made her illness her own fault, and shameful, and unspeakable. It isolated the sick women from each other, and from anyone who might have helped. That was the strategy, not to win the argument, to make the women too discredited to make it. So a small number of them decided to sue, and immediately hit a wall that had nothing to do with medicine. Under the law at the time, in that state, you had 2 years from the date of exposure to bring a claim for an occupational injury. 2 years. And the illness took about 5 to show itself. Read that again. The legal window closed before the symptom appeared. It was not that the women had waited too long. It was that the law had been written for injuries that happen immediately. And radium does not do that. By the time you knew you had a case, you had no case. On top of which, they could not find a lawyer. One woman spent roughly 2 years trying to get anyone to take it on, and was turned down repeatedly because the defendant was a large company, the science was unfamiliar, and the claim looked unwinnable. Eventually, a young attorney took it. 5 women filed. The newspaper picked it up, and the name that got printed was the Radium Girls. The case was covered nationally, and it was covered in a specific way, because by the time it came to court, several of the plaintiffs were visibly seriously ill. One could no longer raise her arm to take the oath in the ordinary way. That coverage did something that the legal argument alone might not have done. It made the arithmetic public. Company knew. Company protected its chemists. Company did not protect these women. Company then said it was their own fault. The New Jersey case settled in 1928. Each woman received a lump sum, an annual payment, and medical costs covered. No admission of liability. And the settlement, by any measure, was small against what had been taken from them. But it established something. It established that this was a case you could bring at all. Then it happened again. In Illinois, at a different company, women who had read about the New Jersey case asked their employer whether they were at risk. The company took out a newspaper advertisement assuring them they were safe. It was not true. The woman who led that fight was a former dial painter named in the records as the lead plaintiff, and her hearing has become the most quoted moment of the whole affair because by the time it took place, she was too ill to attend a courtroom. So the hearing came to her. The commission convened in her bedroom. She gave her testimony from her bed, in her own house, with a reporter present, and she won. The company appealed, and appealed, and appealed again, 8 times, through every level available to them, until finally the Supreme Court declined to hear it, and the ruling stood.